welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 284, and today's date is February 7th, 2014, and the title of this episode is A Cyber Attack in America Will Cause a Ripple Effect Around the World. And we are going to get into that a little bit later in this report, but let's get into the economic collapse news. We're going to head out to Argentina, and we understand in Argentina they've been having very tough economic times, and it just so happens that there was a fire in Iron Mountain, and Iron Mountain is a corporation that keeps companies and bank information and local government information safe. It could include backup tapes, it includes optical drives, and it includes important paper documents and files and things like that. Now, you would think that Iron Mountain would keep all the documentation, backup tapes, optical drives, DVDs, CDs, whatever they're taking, to keep separate from the company. So just in case the company was on fire, they would have all their records safe someplace else. And when I worked for a financial institution, we used to send our backup tapes off to Iron Mountain. Pretty much they were picked up every day. So you would think they would keep them in a enclosed container that was fireproof, but it just so happens these documents, and of course the documents were Argentine corporations and banks, and those documents were destroyed in Argentina. So we can tell that something happened there. It was probably caused by arson because they wanted to get rid of some evidence of something, and this is why there was a fire like this in Argentina. Now, here in the U.S., the unemployment numbers have come out, and we understand that they were expecting 180,000, and it was a complete miss. Only 113,000 people were employed for January. And so what happened? Well, because it was a miss, and of course they're blaming it on the weather and everything else, they decided to bring the unemployment rate down from 6.7% to 6.6%. And again, these numbers are manipulated, and does it mean that much to us? No, because we know that the unemployment is much, much higher. They can bring it down to 4%. It wouldn't make a difference because these numbers aren't real. And if we look at this, we look at teen unemployment. Teen unemployment right now is around 21%, 3 times the national average. And of course, this is the government numbers. It's probably much, much higher. But let's just go through this. And the teen unemployment rate went up to 21% in January, and it was 18.3% in December. And it's continually increasing. It's not falling back down. And we can also see in people who are over 19 to 25, the unemployment rate there is very, very high. And many college kids coming out of school cannot find work. There's just nothing out there. They're finding part-time jobs, or they're finding work that has nothing to do with what they went to school for. And most of these kids are still living with their parents because the amount of money that they're making is not enough to support themselves. Plus, the government realizes that the student loan debt is so high right now, and many students aren't paying it back, and that's why they started this program where students can take their student loan payments and push it off to sometime in the future, or their payments are much, much lower because they're starting to realize these students aren't paying back their loans, and that is because they can't find jobs. Now, since we understand that unemployment is completely manipulated and changed, what the government always does when, the lie starts coming out and the illusion starts falling apart, they recreate and manipulate the numbers further. And we saw this with GDP. They went back to 1929 and decided to include research and development and recalculate GDP all the way back up to the present time. We just saw this with inflation, where they decided to add things like house cleaning and other things into inflation, and they recalculated that so the numbers look good. And now the unemployment is not looking good because it's starting not to make sense. I'm starting to see this on the corporate media where they're saying, this many people fell off, but our unemployment is like this, and this many people are out of work, and they're not actually working, but they want work, but they can't find work. And so what they're doing now, since the illusion is falling apart, they have to manipulate it a little bit more. And the BLS just revised its establishment survey data, in the process changing all historical job numbers. Establishment survey data have been revised as a result of the annual benchmarking process and the updating of seasonal adjustment factors. As a result of this revision, the stock level of jobs as reflected in the establishment survey rose by 500,000 as of December 31st. And so all key historic data from GDP in early 2013 to jobs has now been revised to reflect a more rosy economy. They continually need to change and manipulate everything to fit the illusion. And when it starts falling apart, this is what they end up doing. Because now there are people asking too many questions. I mean, we had a Wall Street exec figuring out the unemployment and saying, wait a minute, unemployment's really around 37%. We have shadow stats who's saying unemployment's reaching very close to 30%. So things are not making sense. And then we take a look at the real economy and we see the holiday season with retail sales. We see housing, mortgages plunging 66%. Most of the homes being purchased with cash from hedge funds and investors and outside investors. Things do not make sense in the real economy, and this is why they need to keep the illusion continually going. Now, we remember during the holiday season that people didn't have money to pay for the holiday gifts, so they dipped into their savings to purchase, and they took out from their savings about $46 billion from their savings, and the U.S. savings rate went down to a one-year low of 3.9%, and it's still dropping and it's still going down. Now we have new information that revolving credit, which is credit cards, saw a substantial $5 billion increase in outstandings, the most since 2013. So when people had no more money in their savings, they decided to turn to their credit cards during the holiday season, and they put $5 billion on their credit cards. And when, again, I noticed on the corporate media they're making it sound like this is great, that credit card spending is going up. That's really just putting people more into debt, and I don't find this is a good thing. I find this is a terrible thing, because if you can't pay for anything with your own cash, then you shouldn't be buying it, really, because debt is one of the worst things that could happen to the everyday person, because I realize from all my friends and from everyone, if you really take a look around, people are living paycheck to paycheck, and they need credit cards just to get by. And that tells me that there's something wrong with our entire system. And as income goes down, prices go up. So the money that you're making, you can't afford anything. So you have to look towards the credit cards. You have to look to the payday loans. And we're seeing this happen all across the world. This system is completely set up so everyone will fail. That you cannot move ahead in this type of system unless, of course, you're making millions and millions of dollars and you're able to keep your finances under control. But for the everyday person who's making the same amount of money, it is very difficult to move ahead in this economy. And, they're talking about unemployment here, that it's getting better, people are getting jobs, people are making more money. And if we really look around, if that is all true, retail sales wouldn't be going down. Houses, people would be buying them with no problem whatsoever. You wouldn't see mortgage applications plunging. You wouldn't see pending sales declining. And we can see that this is completely false. And if we really look, and let's just review this for a second, of the amount of layoffs in just the last couple of weeks, we're looking at Volvo at 4,400 employees. We're looking at Ashland Inc., a chemical maker, 1,000 jobs. We're looking at Swiss drug maker Novartis, 4,000 jobs. We're looking at British-Swedish multinational drug maker AstraZeneca. They're cutting jobs around 5,600 people. Japanese tech giant Sony, 5,000 jobs. Dell, 15,000 people. EMC Corp, 1,000 people. Time Inc., 500. North American manufacturers are shedding workers. 500 workers will lose their jobs beginning next week as International Paper shuts down. GenCorp, 225 people. U.S. Steel, 820 workers. Kellogg Company, 195 jobs. Best Buy in Canada, 950 people. Sears, 634 jobs. 1,600 positions would go as it moved ahead with plans to close its Canadian call centers and reduce warehouse staff. United Airlines, 470 jobs. So we can see what is happening. Companies are laying off and they are not hiring. And these are the major companies, and we're seeing this happen more and more layoffs are coming. Where are these people going to find work? This is my question, and I'm finding from friends it is very difficult to find work. They are putting resumes out there, and the friends that I know are in the tech industry. They're sending them out. They see these jobs. They're on Dice, on Munster, all these places. They're going to consulting firms, and they're putting their resumes out there, and nothing is coming back. Not even an answer of saying, oh, we have this job. And if they do get an answer, it's a job for a month or a job for 2 months consulting, and that is it. There is very limited amount of work. And actually, the salaries that they're looking at for those jobs are half of what they used to make. So people aren't even paying what they were just a couple months ago. Now, recently there's been a top advisor to the Chinese government, and he is calling for a global currency to replace the U.S. dollar. The former chief economist at the World Bank, Justin Lin, is advising the Chinese government that the time has come for a single global currency. He says that the U.S. dollar is the root cause of global financial and economic crisis, and that moving to a global super currency will bring much needed stability to the global financial system. China has already announced that it will no longer be stockpiling more U.S. dollars. It's also slowing the purchasing of treasury bonds. We see the same thing in Russia, and as the rest of the world starts moving away from the U.S. dollar, global power is going to shift even more to the east, and that is going to have a very serious consequence for ordinary Americans. It is perhaps a good time for the befuddled world to start considering building a de-Americanized world. And right now, China accounts for more global trade than anyone else in the world. China imports more oil from Saudi Arabia than anyone else in the world. China imports more oil overall than anyone else in the world. It is now being projected that the Chinese GDP will surpass U.S. GDP in 2017. When the rest of the world quits using the U.S. dollar to trade with one another and quits lending our dollars back to us at ultra-low interest rates, things are going to start changing very rapidly. And as the rest of the globe moves away from the dollar, demand for the dollar is going to go down, and that is going to cause a lot of inflation, especially for imported goods. And as the rest of the globe moves away from the U.S. debt, interest rates are going to go much higher than they are today. China is also rapidly catching up to the United States militarily. At a time when U.S. military spending is actually decreasing, China is spending money on the military aggressively. The balance of power is shifting right in front of our eyes. The Chinese Navy right now has 77 surface combatants, more than 60 submarines, 55 amphibious ships, and about 85 missile-equipped small ships. According to the report first published by the U.S. Naval Institute, the report explains that more than 50 naval ships were laid down, launched, or commissioned in 2013, and a similar number is planned for 2014. Of particular concern is the growth of Chinese submarine fleet. The Chinese now have submarine-launched ballistic missiles with a maximum range of about 4,000 miles. And we have to remember, while that is all going on and countries are moving away from the U.S. dollar, we have problems in many other parts of the world. And what I'm talking about is the Middle East. And I discussed this many, many times with the Middle East. We have problems in Africa. We have problems in Thailand. We have problems in the Ukraine. We have problems in Tunisia. We have problems now in Bosnia. All of this is being spread, and I'm going to explain what is going on with all of these different areas a little bit later in this report. But let's look at here, and I'm located in the United States, but let's look in the United States, and I've talked about Common Core before. Common Core is a new method of teaching children in public school. This was created by the federal government, and they have been giving this to the state, not giving it, the states have been purchasing it. They receive money from the federal government if they accept Common Core. And Common Core is completely developed to dumb down the American child and to make them obedient slaves as they grow older. It completely takes away imagination. It completely takes away the thought process. It completely makes them idiots. And this is what they've been pushing onto every single state. And right now, New York is completely fighting back. Parents, teachers, and many other states are, but New York right now is very angry, and educators are looking at this and saying, what is this? This doesn't even make sense. And this goes on to say that the controversial standards are have inappropriate material, and its massive cost, their devastating impact on teachers and students, and more. If you wanted to destroy public education, this is what you would do. And this is what the teachers in New York are saying right now. The material is often highly inappropriate. The lawmaker continued, explain to me why a first grader has to point out ancient Mesopotamia on a globe or explain their contributions to modern civilization. They are 6 years old. It makes no sense for them to do this at this point. And again, I've looked at many of the Common Core, and the way they want you to figure out math with slashes and circles instead of learning the easy way, and most of the time the kids get it wrong. And what they're telling the children is that even if you get the answer wrong, you're still right. So 2 plus 2 is really 5 if you can explain it well enough. And the information that they have in history books have been completely changed around. They are completely changing it to fit the elite, the central banker, the globalist agenda. They talk about global warming. They changed the Constitution in many of the history books. They reworded it to make it fit their agenda. And we can see that this has been set up to completely make each of these children forget about the Constitution and what it really means, completely rewrite the history so people don't understand what happened back in time, because again, they're learning the history from these books, and they won't be able to function in everyday life except to do a certain task and job being controlled by their superiors. They will have no imagination. They will have no way of thinking on their own, and this is what they are looking to do, because they understand, they completely understand, that the next wave of the American person is going to be these children. And when all is said and done, and we're completely done with World War III, they want to reset the system, put all these dumbed down children. And again, I look at the Common Core and I see the stuff my children that they're bringing home, and my wife and I, we teach them the opposite of what is going on there, so they know that. And actually, we're thinking about pulling them out completely and just homeschooling them, because I do not like what I'm seeing at all. But right now, they are doing this because they realize what is going to happen. They want to reset the system after the war, because the war is going to cover up the economic collapse. They believe that they are going to be in control of everything after the war has ended, and they are going to completely remove the Constitution. They're going to rewrite the laws here in the U.S. They really want to expand their control across the U.S. and into Europe and create one global type of government, and this is their plan moving forward. Now, what are we seeing out in Europe right now and out in other places, the Middle East and Africa and all these places. Now, I discussed with you that there's problems in the Middle East. We understand Al-Qaeda in the Middle East are the people rising up who want to push the U.S. government, central bankers out of their country, and they want their country back. Okay. The Ukraine, they want that government out, and they want to put in a puppet government, so the Ukraine will join NATO and go and put a private Western central bank so they can put the country into debt. This is what they're trying to do. Thailand, they have already a puppet government in there, and the people, the protesters, are rising up right now and fighting back, and they want that puppet government out of there. Thailand, the people have spoken. There is no confidence in their government and in their system, and this is why they were trying to stop the elections there in that country, because they know it's completely fixed. Now, in Sudan, what's happening, we have China on one side, which is the rebels, and China is pouring in billions of dollars into the infrastructure. And by the way, they're pouring in U.S. dollars into the infrastructures because they're trying to unload as many dollars as they possibly can. So they're using it to build up the infrastructure in Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, all these different areas. And again, this is why France, the EU, are in Central Africa and are in Mali, and of course, they're fighting down Al-Qaeda, which are the rebels who don't want these governments in their country. And we can see what's happening now. They've taken on a new country, Bosnia. The government said yes, they were in talks about joining NATO and the EU, and they kind of backed away from it. Now, we understand the central bankers cannot wait. This is the end game, and this is why you're seeing all of this come about right now. They need to get all these countries onto the private Western central bank, onto the U.S. dollar, using it for their natural resources. They need to push this agenda forward, and they're trying to get as many nations as they can under the umbrella of NATO, because they understand that the war is coming and they need more nations under the umbrella of NATO. So in Bosnia, what is happening is they're trying to push that government into joining NATO and the EU, and they are pushing hard by doing the same thing they have done in the Ukraine. They started riots. They riled everyone up, and we are seeing the same thing take place in Bosnia right now. And this is because we are in the end game. They are trying to push the agenda as far as they possibly can to keep everything propped up. But when they start losing ground, what we're going to see, especially in Africa, the Middle East, that really use the U.S. dollar right now, we're going to see countries where they're not going to hold the U.S. dollar anymore, because they will not need the U.S. dollar to pay for these natural resources. And if they do not need it, it comes back to the U.S., and then we see interest rates go up, we see inflation, and then we see the collapse of the dollar. And all we need is one of these countries to start it. It will be like a domino effect, and the whole system will completely come falling apart at this time. Now, there were some incidents in the Ukraine. There are reports out there, and it's proving that the U.S. is trying to overthrow the government in Ukraine, and there were some talks back and forth where there were curses exchanged. And right now, the United States is ready to provide financial support to the Ukraine if the country implements the necessary political reforms, and we can see what is happening. They want to put in a government that is controlled by the central bankers, U.S. government, and they are trying to push the agenda forward right now. Now, Russia, has lent money to the Ukraine in the past, and Russia right now might intervene into the Ukraine. Russia might actively intervene if the country's crisis deepens. Under the document, Russia and the U.S. are guarantors of the sovereignty of the territorial integrity of the Ukraine and are obliged to intervene when conflict situations of the nature arise. And what the Americans are getting up to now, unilaterally and crudely interfering in Ukraine's internal affairs, is a clear breach of the treaty. And this could spark something big. We're going to have to watch this and see what happens. Now, in my past reports, I was reporting on that the missile interceptors here in the U.S. completely failed, and right now the Pentagon, the U.S. Defense Department, plans to ask Congress for $4.5 billion in extra missile defense funding because the missiles pretty much don't work and they cannot defend us if there is some type of attack. Nearly $1 billion of that sum will pay for a new Homeland Defense radar to be placed in Alaska, with an additional $560 million to fund work on new interceptors after several failed flight tests. We need new interceptors that actually work, said one of the congressman's sources, adding that both of the existing kill vehicle models also needed to be fixed and tested, since the replacement would need about 5 years to be made ready. We need to have these things as soon as possible. And this is what is happening because they realize that none of this equipment works. And if we look at the U.S. military, a lot of the planes and the ships and the missiles do not work at all, and this kind of troubles me, that the defenses and the systems are not actually working the way they're supposed to be working. Now, the Geneva II talks are going to continue. They are set up for February 10th, and the opposition says, as at this point, they're not going to attend. I mean, there's more than one opposition group that attends this. One of them is not going to attend because they're not going to talk about Assad leaving the government, and he will not be part of the transitional government. And of course, the Syrian government is attending, and they are not going to talk about any type of transitional government because it is a sovereign country, and if Assad is going to be removed, that will be by the people, and this is what they keep talking about. And again, these Geneva II talks will end up going absolutely nowhere, and nothing will actually happen. Now, in a couple of reports back, we understand that the Sochi Olympics, the ceremonies started, and some of the reporters, landed there, and they said, my phone, my tablet, my computer, whatever it was hacked into. And I said, absolutely not. They were not hacked into. Now, we have to understand, for a system to be hacked into, they either need to have a backdoor already put into the system, and you have to know how to navigate into the backdoor, or you have to download a malicious malware, and that could come from anywhere. And now these reports are saying that the report that this reporter first let out, showing how easily the electronic devices could be hacked, they're saying that it is kind of not true, because what happened was this reporter downloaded an Android app. It was a malicious app, and that could have happened anywhere, of course, because it doesn't matter where you are. He downloaded it. There was a virus in it, and because Android phones are susceptible to viruses, and this is what happened. Yes, there are ways of intercepting data that flies across the airwaves, but again, if your information is encrypted, which most of it is, most of the important things are encrypted, it is very difficult to understand what this information is unless you have the method or the actual key to decrypt this information. And the only organization that I know that has the method to almost every single public encryption system is the NSA. The only organization that I know that can do this and has backdoors into phones, into computers, who's put software onto systems is the NSA. So this story is completely falling apart, and we have to use common sense here. And again, I am not for Russia or China, but I like to use common sense here. All eyes are on Russia, and it's almost like what we did with Syria with the false flag event in August, when the United States, the central bankers, all the private Western central bank countries said that the Assad regime used chemical weapons on his own people. We have to think all eyes are on Sochi right now, right? Everyone's looking at Russia right now with the Olympics. Would they be so stupid, with every single country looking at them, to do something like this at this point in time? Yeah, they might hack and do something at different times when all eyes are not on them, but when all eyes are on a specific country, when all countries are in the country, why would they hack people as they're coming off the planes? If they have the ability, why would they do this at this time? We need to use common sense. What would be the motive? What would be the reason they would do this at this time? Because this would not turn out positively for Russia. Again, they wouldn't. Now, there are tech experts out there who are saying that a cyber attack, it will send ripples across the world if America is hit. And this goes on to say that cyber assaults on the nation, critical infrastructure are on the rise at an alarming rate, says Dr. Oliver McGee. McGee is the former United States Deputy Assistant Secretary of Transportation for the Technology Policy and is currently a professor of engineering at Howard University at Washington, D.C. And he goes on to say that the effect of these cyber attacks are far-reaching and have potential economic consequences. While some of the major companies have experienced isolated incidents, McGee is concerned about the cyber attacks that feature a simultaneous rolling effect in which several attacks spontaneously occur at once across different industries over a prolonged period of time and get progressively worse to disrupt critical infrastructure. He also mentions that the interconnectedness of the cities of the electrical grid across America with the financial institutions around the world would make these attacks especially dangerous. As he says, if a major cyber attack occurs in America, there would be a ripple effect around the world because everything is so interconnected that if something is taken down, it will spread across the country and then go into other countries, and the entire system would completely come to a screeching halt. And we can see that they've been building and building the propaganda up for a cyber attack. Now, Bank of England is warning on a cyber threat to the markets, to the financial markets. And they have done their test, which was called the Waking Shark 2. It's almost like the Quantum Dawn 2 type of simulation, and the results are out, and they're saying that they are completely prepared in some areas, but the main areas they are not prepared for. And if these financial institutions are attacked, there is absolutely nothing at this point that could stop them, and they would decimate the whole financial market at this time. And again, we understand that this is what they are trying to do. This is why you see all these drills. This is why DHS, the government, and other agencies haven't really been looking into cyber attacks or putting anything into it because they want this to occur. They've been setting this up. We've been seeing very strange glitches in the NASDAQ, in the stock exchange, in the Chicago Mercantile, in many websites across the country like Amazon, Netflix, Vine, and many others who've seen many strange glitches occurring. We also understand that the Syrian Electronic Army, if there really is one, has been cyber attacking many different companies. We've seen Target being hit, Neiman Marcus, and many other retailers being hit, building the propaganda to let us know that cyber attacks are happening. Now we saw the power grid infrastructure have a physical attack, and this looks like it is a dry run for something much bigger. And this is why they had the Grid X2 drill, and this had to do with cyber attacks. It had to do with EMP and physical attacks on the infrastructure. Now what we're seeing right now is out in Sochi, okay, and this all has to do with the entire terror threat that we're under right now. And of course, it's pretty much all propaganda to make us, scared, to give up more of our rights. And of course, there's a toothpaste bomb out there, and now TSA is out there saying, okay, anyone who's flying from the U.S. to Russia cannot bring any toothpaste, liquids, makeup, or anything on the plane whatsoever, and they've just taken away more of your rights while traveling. And right now, today it happened, there was a plane that was supposedly, allegedly hijacked from the Ukraine, and they wanted to go to the Sochi Olympics. So let's get this straight. The problem in Ukraine, there are riots and protesters. There's a person who wanted to get onto a plane here, and they are talking about a bomb threat, and they wanted to go to the Sochi Olympics. Seems like kind of a setup to me, and it seems like this was kind of orchestrated, and this is what I'm seeing right now. And right now, of course, the Department of Homeland Security is now getting involved in all this terror threats because we understand that Syria, they are very worried about the people returning from Syria. The FBI has already stated that the people are inside the United States, and right now Jay Johnson said today, Friday, that Syria has become an issue of homeland security for the United States. And on Friday, he said that DHS and the FBI and the American intelligence community will continue to work closely to identify al-Qaeda-linked groups from Syria in the United States. He said the department has become very focused on foreign fighters heading to Syria, where foreign Islamists have radicalized the complicated the 3-year civil war with Assad. DHS is concerned that these fighters will do what they will do when they return home here to the United States. Some of them have returned, and they're very nervous about what they will actually end up doing, and they are searching and trying to find most of these people. And we can see what is happening here. They're building up the propaganda for some type of cyber attack, for some type of false flag event that has to do with chemical, biological, because they understand they need to push the agenda forward. They need to bring this full circle and start the war, and that would be World War III. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.